Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. Today going to be working on the 1991 Dutch Coupe, my recent buyback acquisition earlier this year, and I've been slowly putting away at it and trying to get it right. Well, for my definition of right, trying to get it back to the car that I once remember and trying to get it to be more car than I remember, as I was a little bit young and dumb back then in those days. And well, now, I want to make sure that where I might have cut some corners or I might have done things due to lack of experience or just younger age, whatever you want to call it, different styles is another way of looking at it, and just trying to get it up to this day and age in a car for 2021. So the last video I did on this car, I slammed it right down, and you can see it's sitting pretty low in the back here, and it's sitting on Raceland Coil Overs suspension, and it is the entry-level kit, so the black housings with the red springs. It does have the caster camber plates installed as well, and this thing is cranked down as far as it can go, and well, I've dealt with the ride quality long enough. So that's going to be one of the tasks that I'm going to be tackling. I have to say, the fronts actually ride pretty good. I'm still a little bit puzzled as to why the Stalker Vert is lower in the front than this Coupe is. They're both slammed as far down as they can go. The only difference is the Stalker Vert, I'm running Maximum Motorsports caster camber plates, and this one I'm running the Racelands, but the spacing of the bushings and everything else should all be the same. So that's a little interesting. Who knows? Maybe it could be the wheel and tire setup as well, just, throwing off my vision, or maybe like an optical illusion. But the reality is the Stalker Vert's rolling on 18s. These are 17s, especially with a 45 or a 245/45 in the front. You think that'd be sitting a little bit lower. But anyways, going to be swapping that out. Like I said, the fronts are okay. The rear's way too harsh. Just no give, no rebound. Everything is just clunk, clunk, bang, bang. And it makes for a pretty harsh ride. One other thing that I recently did is I built up some custom seat brackets so I could get my Recaro logo scatter pattern seats installed. These things look absolutely wonderful. Really, really happy with the way that these turned out. And my apologies, I didn't take any footage of making the custom seat brackets, but I did post it on my social media. One other thing that I did is I put a factory pillar back on here. I got rid of the two large 2 5/8 autometer gauges that I had. It was just too much for this car. It's not a race car, and I wanted to get my factory temperature gauge back. So in regards to the suspension being super stiff, well, it means I'm going to swap it out. What am I going to swap it out with? Well, got a bunch of fancy red parts here, more red parts, and I'm going to be installing most of what you see here. So I got a new set of upper and lower control arms for the rear. These guys have bushings, and I'm sure that they're going to definitely add to some comfort of the ride. And I'm actually going to go back to a spring and strut setup. I want the car to sit pretty much the way that it is now. I just want to make sure that the ride quality is better. All right, so here we are in the shop, and didn't want to bore you guys with just swapping out normal suspension stuff, and otherwise the time lapse just would have gone on forever. I've already got the front swapped out in the front of the 91 here. You can see the Raceland Coil Overs are sitting on the ground, and Koni's installed, and I didn't go with the Dutch springs in the front. And long story short, I called up Peter Hansen today, and I said, Peter, can you tell me what the spring rates were before the SN95 spec springs? So the SN95 spec springs were actually 1,000 pounds per inch. So for every 1,000 pounds, they would only compress down an inch, which is an extremely high spring rate. And Before that, in the Foxbodies, the spring rates were different. So I asked him, and he said he didn't remember, but he said that they were significantly lower. So I was like, okay, well, if I take a little bit of material off, you know, it would essentially increase the spring rate up a little bit. And he didn't like that. He doesn't like it when you start throwing off the suspension geometry and everything else of what the springs were supposed to do back in the day. And fair enough, I probably shouldn't be cutting into ultra rare springs. So he told me, go ahead and modify something else. So I went ahead and got some modified H&R race springs in the front. I did do a little test lowering earlier. Everything seems to be turning out all right. Mr. Notorious has shown up since from his day job, and we are tackling the rear. So this is where things get interesting. So I had these solid mount style lower control arms here. So you can see there is no bushing here. These are just hard sleeves that go into your torque box area. And these things just, they're noisy. And I had clunks and bangs, and being so low, these aren't helping anything. Now there are bushings on the back side here, and that's important for what we're facing right now. So, tripping over sway bars. I'm not upset though, because I love me sway bars.
I'd say that's a rare occurrence for you. You don't normally have sway bars to trip over.
So, so Jordan's got the new lower here, and I don't even know who makes them. The box just says red control arms.
Generic American Muscle.
Yeah, so
eBay, NPD.
They're pretty standard. They're tubular, they're red, they look cool. But what we ran into is that the hardware that they use is larger than stock. So what that meant was we needed to actually drill out the hole up in the front area a little bit more so it could be accommodating to fit the new hardware through. So the problem now that we're facing is the rear portion on the rear diff. The hardware that's supplied, you would think that we could just go ahead and drill this out and everything would be good. But with the Dutch grabbers here, we actually need longer hardware, and we don't have any bolts that are long enough and thick enough to fill the sleeves that go into these control arms. So Jordan's bringing these guys over here because we've come up with a solution. And the solution is the sleeves are actually the same diameter on the outside. So the difference is the inside. So this one is actually smaller diameter, which is stock hardware size. And this guy is larger on the inside. So it's actually a thinner sleeve. So the good news is we can actually take the sleeve out of there and put it in here, and it's going to solve our problem. That means we can reuse our hardware.
Yes.
So Jordan has fabbed up this very interesting control arm witchcraft station to press out the old sleeves, because they are kind of a pain. Now they have been all lubed up and everything else. So what we're doing is we're using a sleeve and a socket that can push the sleeve that's in the control arm into the socket. And it's one of those things that you need an extra set of hands to do.
Yeah.
There we go. So once you get that started, and then from here, we can put it in this vise, and then we wiggle and jiggle, and there we go.
Slide your sleeve out.
This is my only vehicle that I have here, so I need to be able to drive this home later. I'm sure we'll get it done. Just small little hiccups, and this is kind of the interesting stuff that I think is worth sharing with you guys. You've seen me do enough suspension swaps and pulling springs and control arms and struts and everything else out. So the Dutch grabbers, in case you guys are wondering, this guy pretty much just relocates the mounting point of your lower control arm down a little bit further, and until what this does is it changes your pinion angle, changes your suspension geometry, actually lowers the car down a little bit as well, because your lower control arm is actually sitting down a little bit lower, and helps with traction and overall handling and performance of your Fox. So of course, you know, I want to keep those in there for obvious reasons. And we will get the set of rear H&R race springs installed here. These guys have been cut down as well, and I got a set of Koni reds that'll be going in the rear as well. So the idea here is that I'm going to have this car just as low as it was with the coilovers, but it's going to ride a lot better than it did with those coilovers. And not to say that you can't get a good ride out of coilovers, just saying that Racelands, putting them to their lowest setting is a little pushing the limits. We'll just say that. We'll leave that there. You know, the Racelands do work good. If you're just lowering like 2 inches with them, you know, maybe even 3 inches, not stretching their full drop, they do quite well. The fronts actually impress me more than the rears. I think I've said that before. The Stalker Vert, they actually work really well in the front. The rears, I ended up using my own setup with an adjustable coil perch and springs and shock setup. But I just figured this way I'd be able to sell the Racelands off. So if anybody's interested, if they're not sold before this video is posted. What are you saying?
Keep in mind too, the Racelands may not have the greatest ride. Combined with these Heim joints, that's really going to accentuate how rough the ride is. You have zero cushion in here compared to actually having a bushing on there. So if you got really stiff suspension, shocks, struts, combined with zero cushion on a Heim joint here, that will definitely accentuate it. So going back to a traditional control arm that has 2 poly bushings and being able to have a traditional shock setup should dramatically increase the ride quality, even
Absolutely.
being low.
Even being low. And for anybody who's probably seen it and hasn't said anything, and I've said this before, this exhaust is completely hacked, absolutely hacked. Like, it is so bad. I might have to do a whole video just on this exhaust because that's how bad it is. Like, you can see how my tips are sitting in here, you know, sitting against the bumper, sitting against the control arm, 19 different sections of pipe all joined together. Yeah, no, this exhaust hanger randomly welded here, dents for clearance reasons, exhaust hangers that aren't hooked up. Not my doing, honestly, not my doing. That'll get fixed, but the panhard bar needs to go on first because there needs to be accommodation on the passenger side to make sure the exhaust will clear the bar that's coming down. So just throwing that out there. Horrible exhaust. Still sounds kind of cool, but horrible, horrible exhaust. Right. Ta-da!
That's hilarious that that came out that easy.
I know, right? So that's all good to go. Yeah. So we ran into a small issue. Small issue is that the uppers are supposed to use factory size hardware, and while they only provided 1 sleeve that is this size. So what we're doing is we're actually enlarging these 2 holes like we had to do down here, and using the larger hardware up on this side. We cut down the sleeve, which was longer, to make it fit in the control arm, and we already got the driver's side all loosely bolted up, so everything's working good there. So I just need to go ahead and drill out these 2 holes so we can get the bigger hardware in there. Then we can bolt this arm in. and double check everything, get our springs in, tighten it all down, change the shocks, do an alignment, do a test drive, bolt the sway bar on before all that.
Oh yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. We'll get it done.
20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes. All right, what a night. We are just wrapping things up. Ran into a few hurdles with, actually it's all hardware related at the, or in the grand scheme of things. It seems that, I don't know, neither one of us would recommend the hardware that came with the kit. Just says grade 8, but that just might be the brand name. So we changed some stuff up. We added some washers, changed some fasteners, and put in stuff that we felt would work best. Just finishing bolting up the shocks, and got our H&R Race rear springs here. So we will make sure that these are in the proper position when we put weight on the car. But other than that, things are looking really good in terms of the control arms. There's now clearance from the exhaust, which will probably get rid of some of the rattles, although it still isn't an excuse to keep it. But we'll finish buttoning up this stuff and probably call it a night. The test drive will be on my way home, and fingers crossed everything will ride good and handle well.
Well, it's a bit of an endeavor when you have to drill out holes and there's no space to actually get anything in there, but we made it work. Adapted and overcame, but as previously mentioned, the hardware, it says grade 8 or grade 8.8. It's pretty soft, and nylock nuts, again, pretty soft. They strip pretty easy, so do yourself a favor. If there's an option to order the control arms without the hardware, save yourself 20 bucks. Go to your local hardware store, get real American-made grade 8 hardware, and you'll appreciate it a lot better.
There you have it. All right, guys, so it's the next morning, and I'm cruising back to the shop on the fully swapped over suspension. I didn't do a video last night because, well, it was after midnight. It would have been dark in the car. You guys wouldn't have seen me. So the car rides extremely better than it did with the old setup. A lot of that I know attributes to the solid rear lower control arms with the Heim joints in them. You know, especially with the clanking and banging noises that I was hearing. So that's all gone. The front ride's really good. I'm gonna play around with the adjustment of the Konis, and I need to do a proper alignment on the car. So now with any lowered car, most alignment shops are scared to deal with them. So I actually recently got this tool, this quick alignment tool, and it's sitting at the shop. I've unboxed it, I've gone through the parts, but I haven't used it yet. So that's actually going to be the next thing for this car. It'd be, I guess, worthy of a lottery ticket if I were to have changed all the struts and everything else and bolted back together, and, you know, the alignment be bang on. So we know it's not. We're going to get it taken care of. But the important thing is the car is riding awesome. So that's it for this episode. I'm happy you got everything swapped over, and we'll see you guys next time when we test out this new quick alignment tool.